I really missed saying this sentence again. The game Mundo Ada was released 10 years ago with a dating simulator aimed at a female audience, but it ended up having a significantly higher number of male players than expected. It allowed users to play with a variety of characters, starting from the easy and more efficient ones, going all the way to the difficult and inefficient ones. Among them there was a trash character, especially known for his level of difficulty and terrible traits. But there was one crazy guy who played with this character for 10 years. He was the player Baek Yu-Seol. On yet another day of gameplay, he wondered if there were new posts on the forum, maybe even a game update. People were talking about a dark demonic dragon, and that some characters had been deleted from the game. So Baek asked himself, is there even a final boss in a dating sim? He always thought the game ended when you got together with one of the characters. Then a very famous hacker posted the same thing, saying it was impossible to defeat this boss. Baek said it made no sense to have a monster that could nullify magic in a magical world. He wondered if it was a bug in the game. People were saying that characters were being deleted too. Then he came face to face with the dark demonic dragon, the 13th moon of the Black Knight. It was explained that in the world of Aether there was a cult-like organization known as the Dark Demonic Humans. Their goal was to help another world called Persona Gate to conquer this one. When they finally achieved that goal, the dark demonic dragon appeared. Baek realized that 90% of the continent had been taken over by Persona Gate. Until then he hadn't cared much about the story. He just played PvP, but now the whole plot had become a mess. It wasn't like he could avoid fighting that dragon, so he decided to give it a shot. When he logged into the game, he went to fight the dark demonic dragon. Baek was going to show off the skills he had honed over the past 10 years. There he was, with his character. If we were to explain his character, he was the only one in the entire game who couldn't use magic, even though everyone else could. Because of that, even the most experienced players didn't choose to play with him. He was basically worse than an NPC. Well, technically he could use magic, it's just a figure of speech that he couldn't because he could only use one spell. And when Baek was about to be hit by the dragon's roar, he used the only spell he had, the teleportation spell, the famous blink. He easily dodged the attack and re-entered the fight. Baek's blink allows him to travel randomly between 3 to 10 meters in an instant. The direction of the teleport is random, so if you don't control the distance well, you'll die instantly due to crashing into a wall or the ground. On top of that, the cooldown time and mana cost are ridiculously high. It also comes with a penalty that prevents you from moving for 2 seconds after using the ability, so anyone can learn it but most don't use it. However, Baek in the Soul mastered the use of blink. He could control which direction he teleported in, could nullify the movement penalty, and didn't spend any mana because Baek in the Soul didn't have a mana stat at all. Unlike other spells, blink was nothing more than a movement ability, but he became obsessed with that character since everything depended on personal skill. So for the last 10 years he kept playing with the only character who couldn't use magic in battles. And in that moment he managed to tear the dark demonic dragon's head in half, defeating the 13th moon of the Black Knight. Baek asked himself if he had really killed it just like that. Sure, he was decked out with several ancient relic items, and had become insanely strong over the last decade, but still he was a trash character. Even so, Baek said, that was awesome. He was about to tell the community that he defeated the dragon, but before he could, the system notified him that since the bad ending was reached, 90% of the world of Aether had been destroyed. However, Baek in the Soul had come closest to the true ending, and the system requested that he reach it. Suddenly he was transported inside the game. The next second he woke up on an old, cold wooden floor, wondering what the hell was going on and where he was. Looking around he saw a mirror, and when he looked at himself he didn't see his real-world appearance. Instead he saw his in-game character. The system popped up in front of him saying that this was Episode 1, Escape the Pursuit. That's the prologue mission for Baek in the Soul before he enters the academy. He couldn't believe it. When he put his hand in his pocket, he pulled out the acceptance certificate for Stella Academy. It was hard to believe, but he was inside the world of Aether and he had to be Baek in the Soul of all people. He needed to think rationally about the situation. That voice had told him to reach the true ending. As far as he knew, this game didn't even have a true ending. just multiple ones. Maybe in the last 10 years no one had ever actually reached the real one. Now's not the time to think about that, especially because if his memory serves him right after Baek woke up several mercenaries were already chasing him out for his head, and they were really there. The mercenaries had come across the cabin, they were just about to enter it. Baek was inside and he thought that there's a limit to how much he can avoid these mercenaries, and he couldn't fight them either. Then the system notified him that he could use his ability, Blink. With his body suffering from mana leakage syndrome, Baek Yu-Seol, who couldn't store mana in his body, had only one hope, the ability he practiced his entire life. Back to the present, Blink, Class 0. Maximum distance 9 meters. 1 charge only. Cooldown 3 seconds. Baek Yu-Seol wondered if he could use Blink now. He used to do it in-game, controlling the character with a mouse and keyboard. But now the mercenaries were getting closer. He could already hear their heavy footsteps. Baek realized he didn't have much time left. The only thing he could do now was try. The mercenaries saw Baek running out of the cabin, dashing into the forest, and of course they started chasing him. This is the first part of the game's tutorial. Avoid the pursuers using Blink. The pursuers wore magical boots and were much faster than him. Moreover, the only way to successfully escape was by using Blink. But he had never used it in real life. It was just a game before. Still, Baek thought that the timing was ingrained in his mind, in his muscle memory. The mercenaries were getting very close, ready to kill him. And it's said that the biggest downside of Blink is that if the user fails to control the distance, they can crash into an object and die instantly. However, he was Baek Yu-Seol. He knew how to do it. He was different. He dodged the first sword strike that would have hit him. He thought to himself, I actually did it. The mercenaries asked if that was teleportation. Is the kid a mage? But their leader told them not to let their guard down. Right after using Blink, the person gets paralyzed for 2 seconds. Except he wasn't. He was already moving, like the crazy bastard he was. Baek knew he had to calculate everything very carefully. He had to use the uneven terrain to his advantage. Since most players never learn to control Blink at this stage, they are unable to reach the next episode. That's the greatest difficulty of the character. 99% of users who played as Baek Yu-Seol couldn't even pass the tutorial, and the 1% who did, failed at mastering distance control and continuous teleportation. But he could. He used Blink to widen the distance between him and the mercenaries. The leader shouted, "This kid is insane," and told the magic users to go ahead and shoot at him. Baek noticed it. This was part 2 of the tutorial. Use Blink to dodge incoming magical arrows. In the game he could see from behind. Since it was third person watching from the monitor, he could easily dodge. But now the system warned him that he was suffering from mana leakage syndrome. He acquired 2 new abilities derived from it, Sixth Sense and Cognitive Acceleration, that allowed him to sense where the arrows were coming from, and he dodged them using Blink. Eventually only 1 arrow remained and he dodged it masterfully. The large explosion didn't even come close to him, and he continued on to the final part of the tutorial. Part 3, cross the canyon using only Blink. The only way to cross was to perfectly control Blink's distance. Then he encountered some mages passing through and managed to escape. That marked the end of the tutorial. To get past that section, he had to cancel the Blink ability 0.1 seconds at the perfect moment. If he failed even once, he would die. There were about 20 floating stones. 0.1 seconds, easier said than done. And Baek asked himself, what kind of deranged lunatic designed this tutorial? He thought it's doable, just really hard. But the biggest problem was that the mercenaries were getting closer. They were much nearer than he had expected. The distance between him and them was around 100 meters. Since Blink had a 3-second cooldown, it wasn't enough to cross all the way in one go. The most probable method of survival now was to kill them all. So on the edge of the cliff, the canyon, he hid from the mercenaries. Even now he couldn't believe what was happening. It was madness. How could he even think he could do this, when he had never been in a real fight before? But Baek thought, if this were in the game, the system wouldn't even allow me to attack the people chasing me. But this was reality. There was no rule saying he had to follow the game's system blindly. The thought of killing didn't bother him. Not because those people were the enemies of his in-game parents, but because he believed he could win. So he stood up, with only a knife in his hand, facing all the mercenaries. The leader shouted, "Get that bastard now." And as they rushed toward him with spears and swords, the mercenaries thought, "This little brat thinks he's something. He's gonna die soon enough." But Baek calculated the distance and used blink, stabbing the knife straight into the chest of the mercenary, making him. He coughed blood and died. Baek thought that the clear feeling of blood dripping from his fingers didn't make him feel a shred of guilt. After all, he was only killing to survive. After slitting the mercenary's throat, he kicked the body toward the others and of course fled right after. He was using the terrain to his advantage. Baek thought, "I took care of one of them, but the next attack won't be easy now that they're on high alert." Then he noticed the environment had gotten too quiet. They were preparing to use magic against him. He thought he had to dodge with blink, but the terrain was awful now, and when fireballs were shot in his direction, he could barely react. He wondered, why is blink such a crappy spell? That's when he found the only terrain he could teleport to, dodging the explosion by blinking onto a single branch on the cliff. The leader mocked, saying it served him right for being arrogant enough to counterattack. That is, until he realized Baek was no longer there. He had appeared above him mid-attack with his dagger. Baek recalled one of the peculiar traits of blink. It maintains the momentum you had before using it. The rhythm and speed stay the same. He used that momentum to kill the blonde one, then immediately stabbed another mercenary through the chest. Baek was completely wrecked, panting, covered in blood, but he thought, now only 2 are left. He had to finish this before the remaining 2 mercenaries caught up. The leader said, "This kid's really weird. He has freakishly fast reaction time for a mage." And then asked, "What the hell is he?" Baek thought that his reaction speed really was faster than most pro players, but that only applied in a game. Still, Baek realized he couldn't keep dodging forever. He had to end this quickly. The mercenary unsheathed his sword, saying, "I've already figured out this brat's fighting style. All he uses is teleportation and a dagger." The mercenary thought, "If I just protect my neck, nothing can happen." He assumed the kid would charge at him with full force and cast an ice wave spell. But Baek once again used his blink. The wave of ice sped straight toward him. The mercenary realized there was nowhere for the boy to run this time. Except Baek had already struck. Not him, but his ally. The mercenary shouted, "This brat has been running like a rat this whole time. He's never fought back." Baek replied, "Earlier, yeah, but even a rat fights when it's cornered." The mercenary sneered, "You think I'll go easy on you just because you're a brat? This time I'll kill you." But Baek wasn't scared. He threw a spear. It hit the mercenary. Baek knew that blinking straight toward the enemy was too risky. And the mercenary knew that the spear was meant to make him open his sides so Baek could attack from the flank. But he wouldn't let that happen. He was ready to counter an attack from the side, but Baek wasn't there. The attack came from the front. It was all a mental game, a feint, so that Baek could drive the dagger into his chest. And with that, Baek finally completed the first episode, escaping the pursuers. He gained experience, and the Constellatal project promised bonus rewards for developing a unique storyline. Baek was gasping for air, barely able to read the system messages. He was shaking, and dropped his dagger. Then he saw the bodies in front of him. He realized this wasn't a dream. He had used blink for the first time, fought his first real battle, killed his first person. He killed someone to survive so that guilt wouldn't stay with him. Finally, he stood up to leave that place. But before he did, he looked at one of the bodies. Even though it left a bitter taste in his mouth and a weight on his conscience, he had to be realistic. He was going to steal the mercenaries' money, about 2 million WS, which wasn't bad at all. He thought his biggest problem now was getting out of the canyon using the floating stones. But on the other side were those mages, the ones who were just passing by, who would rescue him at the end of the tutorial. They were calling out to him. Baek shouted that he was there, but there was no bridge. Still, he said he'd find a way across. The mage in front said they should help the poor guy since he claimed he could cross. But someone else said, to make it across you'd have to be at least a third-class knight. It was genuinely hard for a child to do this. until they were shocked by what they saw. But Baek was using Blink to leap from stone to stone, getting closer with each jump. It was a beautiful sight, him teleporting from rock to rock. The female mage in the caravan said, "That's Blink teleportation." Someone else asked, "Is that really teleportation? I thought with Blink you couldn't control the direction or distance. That kid's doing something completely impossible." Then one of the mages asked if the two figures approaching were with the boy. But they weren't. One of the mercenaries had prepared another fire spell aimed directly at Baek. The mage on the other side shouted a warning, and Baek barely dodged it using Blink. He realized the earlier mercenaries had caught up. He thought, the cooldown on Blink is 3 seconds. Dodging every magic attack is impossible, especially since I still need to get next stone. He was nearly hit by dark magic. His face wasn't cut, but his hair was. The floating stone he was standing on shattered. All the nearby floating stones were too far away. There was nowhere to run, but he used Blink, hoping to reach one of them. At the last moment, even though it hurt a lot, he managed to grab onto one of the stones. Even after surviving, another fire spell was already targeting him. He thought this was finally it. He was going to die. But then a water shield blocked the fire spell. Baek had no idea where the magic had come from. Besides water, there was also lightning magic involved. He wondered if someone in the tutorial had 2 elemental attributes. Moreover, the caster had calculated the trajectory perfectly, without wasting any mana. When Baek looked across, he saw who had done it, the hooded mage girl. After that, the mercenaries retreated, and Baek had survived, barely. Later, after making it across, he came into contact with those mages. He thanked the girl with the long hair and hood for saving him. She said she didn't do it to be thanked and told him not to worry about it. Baek thought she had a beautiful voice, though it was clearly hard to get close to her. Shifting his focus, he thought about how even though they were known as bandits who raided nearby villages, most of the mercenaries' actions were actually carried out under orders from the Dark Demon cult. But Baek thought all of that was behind him now. Once he escaped through that cliff and entered the territory of the mages, the demon-possessed humans would no longer pursue him, especially since they didn't even know who he really was. Then another system window appeared in front of him. Episode 2, Enroll in Stella Academy. Baek asked if this was already the second episode. It wouldn't be hard, he said, but it felt humiliating to go back to school at his age. Later the journey became so long that Baek fell asleep inside the carriage. In his dreams he saw parts of his childhood. He remembered telling his mother that he wanted to grow up to be a mage, and she believed in him. He studied using second-hand books his parents bought for him. He studied hard so he could make them proud. But later he found out from a doctor that he had mana leakage syndrome, meaning he could never become a mage. Baek wondered whether these were really his memories or the characters. Then he woke up, returning to reality. It was already morning. Someone nearby said they were just about to wake him up anyway. They were nearing Lezoka, the satellite city of Arcanion. They made a brief stop there before continuing. Once again, Baek's eyes met those of the hooded girl, but she simply turned away without saying a word. Baek thought she was pretty cold, but he figured everything was going fine. Apparently he had been worrying for nothing. He was glad that the world felt more modern than medieval. In the world of Aether, although magic existed, there were also safe cities with trains, flying ships, and warp boats used for long-distance travel. They were headed to Lezoka to board a flying ship. Lezoka was on the path to Arcanion, and that's where the real episode would begin. Arcanion, the city of magic, was home to famous magic towers, magical night orders, and 5 prestigious academies. The one with the most powerful mages and the most talented students was Stella Academy. That's why Stella was full of geniuses and nobles from all over the world. He still didn't understand how Baek got accepted into that academy. To be honest, Baek hadn't even checked his full set of abilities yet. His mana leakage syndrome, despite being a curse, gave him advantages in strength, agility, sensitivity, and especially his sixth sense, which consumed mental power to detect mana within a 12-meter radius. It also triggered detection acceleration when danger was nearby. essentially slowing the world down in his perception. He thought, without those things I'd be dead by now. It was explained that mana leakage syndrome is a permanent curse that prevents someone from storing mana in their body. It was a curse both Baek and Seol had. However, it also allowed them to detect mana around them using their sixth sense, even sensing incoming attacks without looking. Detection acceleration made everything appear in slow motion, like having superhuman reflexes. It was an essential ability for both Baek and Seol, who couldn't use mana themselves, but it consumed a massive amount of mental power and had severe consequences afterward. Now his current status was Strength 1 star, Agility, Endurance 0 stars, Sensitivity 1 star, 97%. Stamina, Mental Power. He had 10 XP remaining, Blink was at level 0, and Mana Leakage Syndrome was at level 1. He thought not bad for a starting build. Originally Baal had very low sensitivity, but this seemed to have redistributed the character stats from the one he created. In the world of Aether, skills had levels and status was represented by stars. The maximum number of stars a person could achieve in any attribute was 5, which was basically impossible. He had played this game for over 10 years, and the most he'd ever gotten was 8 stars total in stamina and sensitivity combined. He figured he should invest in sensitivity for now to boost his sixth sense and reaction time. He could improve stamina and agility in other ways. His current problem was mana leakage syndrome. If he doesn't solve this, he won't survive for very long. He needs to evolve toward the secrets of nature. The key to strengthening the mana leakage syndrome lies within Stella Academy, meaning he has no other choice but to go there. He didn't really want to, but it would help him. Then he noticed he had some unread notifications from the system, but it was time to return to his journey. He decided to check them later. Meanwhile, the hooded mage girl was watching Baek. Later, aboard the flying ship headed straight to Arcanion, some nobles looked at Baek and said he looked like a lost child, a country bumpkin. They approached and said they didn't understand why Stella allowed peasants to enroll in what was supposed to be the most prestigious academy in the world. They claimed it was polluting the waters with poor people like him. Baek didn't say anything, he just sighed. He thought, kids are the same everywhere. One noble got really angry at being ignored, but then he noticed some people speaking loudly behind him and got even more irritated until he realized why they were being loud. Princess Hongbian of Adulabi was present. Naturally, everyone bowed and paid their respects. But the noble who had been throwing a tantrum earlier received only a cold, hard glare from her. She passed by everyone in silence. And Baek realized, she is the villain of this world. Hongbian is one of the main characters in the game. She and the female protagonist always end up in conflict and she dies in the end. No matter which route or choice you make in the game, she is brutally killed in every ending. And in other outcomes, even if she isn't killed, she's bullied by everyone at the academy before being expelled. In one path, she is humiliated so badly she never shows herself in public again. It's as if the developers had a personal grudge against her and wanted her to suffer. Still, Baek had heard she was really popular among male players, and sure enough, she was beautiful. But at that moment he was hungry, so he went to get something to eat. He saw the grand banquet laid out, but everything was extremely expensive. He decided to wait until they arrived at Arcanum to eat. Then, a system announcement was made to everyone on the ship. They would be arriving at Arcanine in 10 minutes, and all passengers were to proceed to the first floor. Baek thought, it's finally starting, this is my reality now, and he was ready to give it everything. Well, that's what he initially thought. But can he really survive at Stella Academy? Can he survive in this world? He wished he had something that could help him in situations like this. Then he remembered there was a notification he still hadn't checked. He received a message saying that the Constellate project had given him a special reward. A downgraded version of the items he had used in the game, 2. A downgraded version of the skills he had acquired. 3. Some experience points. Baek remarked, at least these windows have some kind of commercial ethics. He wondered what he should choose. He considered getting some items, but the system said that due to the item's high quality, its performance would be severely reduced. He also tried to pick the hyperspace teleportation skill, but the system said the ability couldn't be acquired because it was too high level or he would only receive a massively nerfed version. Also, due to a lack of narrative power, the system couldn't fully materialize. The narrative power is the force that drives story progression. If he continues to explore unknown parts of the world and follows paths no one else has taken, he can acquire more narrative power. In short, he can't take anything too advanced because he's still a newbie. Then he asked, "What about my bubble glasses?" According to the system, yes, he could receive those, so he claimed his bubble glasses. They were an item that stored all the information he had gathered while playing the game. In this world, it's impossible to recall or access detailed information about monsters hunted or knowledge acquired. So players developed various items to store information efficiently, and these glasses were one of them. He had used them the same way in the game. The glasses included his boo-boo folder and a seal to help him remember things. He opened the boo-boo folder first. It contained data on alchemy materials, hunting, dungeons, monsters, and characters. It was very useful, honestly. He thought, since this place is basically real life now, there's no telling how many repeatable quests I could do using the game system. With the glasses, he could regain at least half the skills he used to have. Then he overheard people talking about Yu-Seol. Apparently Yu-Seol was the girl he had met earlier, and apparently she wasn't very welcome there. Baek, thinking again, remembered that one of the functions of the bubble glasses was the ability to register and check information about characters within the story. So he used it to read about Yu-Seol Mafat. She was the false heroine, wielder of light and ice magic, the eldest daughter of Duke Mov, whose death had led to the decline of her family. And according to the system, she also dies later in the story. Baek thought, so she's the false heroine. To explain briefly, there's something important to point out. Even if the place he is in now is a game called World of Aether, the game itself is actually based on a fantasy novel titled Do Not Love the Princess. It tells the story. The heroine, Yu-Seol, lost her entire family. She grew stronger by confronting the schemes of the villain Hong Bayan, and eventually ends up with the male protagonist by the end of the story. In the end, her plan for revenge disappears completely, and the male characters protect her. However, she received a sad ending due to heavy criticism from readers. The issue is that even though the game world is based on the novel, the story is completely different. In the game, an original character named Flame was added and took the role of the true heroine. Moreover, Flame had a backstory. She actually exists as a reincarnated soul imakai within the novel. So unlike in the novel, Yu-Seol became the false heroine in the game, and Flame became the true heroine. Despite numerous attempts and efforts by players, it was said that Yu-Seol cannot survive in any of the game's possible routes. As a result, she was removed from the position of true heroine. But Baek thought that this had nothing to do with him. Maybe it was just his imagination, but he felt like he had seen her somewhere before. He figured he should get ready to disembark from the ship. Later at Stella Academy itself, it was time for the entrance ceremony. The ceremony speaker said that the dark demonic humans are mages who embraced supernatural powers and were transformed into monsters. Even now, the dark demonic humans continue their invasions, opening persona portals or releasing ancient dungeons to attack the magical world. As mages, their destiny is to protect the world from these dark forces. Next, they announced the ceremony date for the 4 students who were admitted with the highest scores, as well as for the freshman representative. All of these students stepped up onto the podium. Baek thought that every single one of them fit the role of a main character in a story. However, the most eye-catching of all was the freshman representative, Myo-song. He was the student with the highest score that year. In short, Myo-song perfectly embodies the phrase, "Between heaven and earth I am the honored one." He has a 9-star mana status, with potential close to the realm of the gods. A genius among geniuses, he can control all the elements of this world. Even if he doesn't reach the true ending, he should at least focus on avoiding bad endings. Myo-song must stay on the good side of the story, but that doesn't depend on him. It entirely depends on Flame and how she chooses to act from now on. Since she comes from the same reality as Baek, maybe it would be a good idea to get close to her. but things could get complicated if she sees him as an enemy. Since he has the advantage in terms of information, he doesn't need to take unnecessary risks. Flame possesses the body of the character from the novel, meaning she's also been reincarnated, into this world. Even if his importance in the story can't compare to that of a simple village shop NPC, Baek decided to at least try to keep the story on track. Besides, the heroine Flame is the only one with a special ability to purify dark demonic humans, but she also has another ability that can drain the souls of those around her. Being close to her will affect him severely. His role is simply to support the main characters from a distance and avoid getting involved with them as much as possible. With that, the entrance ceremony concluded, and he officially completed episode 2, entering Stella Academy. Later in the classroom, he thought about how long it had been since he graduated from college. It felt strange to be a student again, but having this item helped a lot. The Stella pocket watch. It's proof that you're a student at the most prestigious academy in the world. Possessing it gives you certain privileges and special treatment. He planned to make use of it as quickly as possible. Then the professor arrived and told everyone to sit down. They were about to begin the evaluation. He told everyone to put away unnecessary materials. Baek wondered, an exam right after the ceremony. The academic curriculum at Stella was stricter than most Korean universities. That's because they hold a test on the very first day known as the class placement evaluation. It's meant to determine which class each student belongs to, and it had nothing to do with the standard entrance exam, which is notoriously difficult. Students are placed in classes ranging from F to S based on their scores. Of course, most of the main characters end up in Class S. Meanwhile, Baek and Seol, who entered the academy in last place among the 1,041 students, were placed in Class F. Then he noticed Mayo-song, who was sitting with Taedeo. Baek thought this guy was on another level. He had already finished the evaluation. No wonder everything seemed boring to him. If you had to summarize Mayo-song's personality in one word, it would be tedium. He was born into the most powerful family in the world, the smartest and most talented person alive. Everything came easily to him. That's why so much depends on how the female protagonist behaves in the game. Her disposition will determine Mayo-song's path. For better or worse, the dark demonic humans, whose main goal is to bring ruin to humanity, are very interested in Mayo-song's power. But Baek thought that looking at geniuses only made him feel worse. He wondered if he could use his bubu glasses here. Maybe they would help him understand the language. Just then, the professor approached and asked, "What kind of glasses are those?" The professor said that anyone using special glasses should have informed the school beforehand. He took the glasses to analyze them. The Baek thought that if the professor found out the glasses weren't normal, he'd be expelled. At that moment, the system asked if he wanted to summon the missing part of the bubu glasses. No, he thought, just stay quiet. The professor analyzed them but didn't sense anything unusual and said that next time, Baek should just inform the staff first. So, he used the glasses to understand the language, and not only that, he could see the test answers as well. At this rate, he could even score first place and escape from Class F. But just then, the test ended. While he was still working, the exam paper was pulled from his hands by magic. He had only managed to answer 3 questions. When the professor saw his answers, he was completely shocked. Baek thought he finally had a chance to escape Class F, but it seemed too good to be true. The professor then demanded Baek hand over the glasses again, and upon reanalyzing them said, "This can't be." He told one of the students to call Dr. Grant. Baek wondered what was happening. Was he caught cheating? Later, the bubble glasses were being analyzed by Professor Gra, who taught magical engineering. Gray said that it was suspicious how Baek managed to solve those questions, but the glasses had no magic in them. He didn't cheat. He solved the problems using pure intelligence. Grakrio said, "This guy is really interesting," and told Professor Leo Wall to apologize to the student. Leo Wall apologized and said he'd escort Baek back to class. Baek thought, "To be honest, I really was cheating." He was just lucky that the function on the glasses wasn't active at that moment. Later, when the professors were grading the tests in the staff room, Leon Wall still felt suspicious about Baek's test. Then Professor Adelman approached and asked, Are these the freshman exams? She said she had heard that this year's freshman class was very special. Lian Wall replied, yes, and began listing them. First, Hongbian, the princess of Adalabi, the Flame Kingdom. Then Jeremy Skullru, who completely defeated his older brother in the race for the throne, and was crowned emperor of the Skullver Empire at the age of 12. Also Hai Wang, the successor to the master of the Full Moon Magic Tower. Professor Adelman noted that it had been very difficult to create questions for such gifted students. This year's exam questions were especially interesting. Ranal said he was glad she appreciated them, but also thought about what Professor Elder Taman had said. This year the class placement exam included a new type of question. The first 3 questions were designed to be extremely difficult for students who only studied the standard way. The goal behind these questions was simple, a test of flexibility. Skip the question if it's something you can't solve. After all, you can't solve a problem that doesn't appear in your textbooks. The era of memorization-based magic is over. Now is the era of combat, where quick thinking and creative judgment prevail. Still, those 3 questions weren't meant to be solved easily. 1,000 out of 1141 students left them blank. Among the 100 students who answered, most didn't get even a single one right. But among the freshmen, only 3 students got all 3 questions right. Mario Song, the prodigy of the century who appeared like a comet. 2. Flame, who was admitted by direct recommendation from the headmaster. 3. And the third, Baek Yu-Seol. Wall thought, Mayo Song and Flame are considered geniuses, but Baek Yu-Seol have the lowest entrance scores in the entire academy. He hadn't expected someone like Baek to solve those 3 questions. Especially considering he failed to solve any of the regular problems. Professor Adelman said, this student's score really doesn't make sense. Technically it did, there were numerous formulas and equations that others couldn't solve, but this student somehow did. Renal asked her if she thought this kid was a genius. She said it might be a coincidence, or not. Renal then remembered why Baek had been admitted, because of his special ability to control blink. Renal realized it had been the headmaster himself who personally approved his admission. Baek was a combat mage specialized in blink. That made Ronald even more intrigued by Baek. Later everyone eagerly awaited their class assignments. Everyone wanted to see their scores and where they'd be placed. Baek was sure he'd end up in Class F, as usual, but when people looked at the board they were shocked by Baek Yu-Seol's results. People were asking, how did someone like him who barely made it into Stella end up in that class? Baek thought, no matter how much they talk about me, I'll just check which class I'm in and leave. But he didn't see his name in Class F, or in Class E either. He began to wonder, was I expelled? Did I fail? People around him were saying, there must be a mistake on this class list. How did Baek Yu-Seol end up in this class? And Baek was very curious to see what was going on. He and Seol had been placed in Class S, and he wondered why his name was there. This is the most special rank, the one that all students dream of reaching. Class S, the place where the most exceptional students of the best magic school, Stella, gather. It's different from other classes that have multiple rooms per grade. Class S has only 41 students in a single room. Mike thought this must be a mistake. This can't be happening. He's gonna run into the main characters all the time now. Getting involved with protagonists will only shorten his lifespan. From now on he's going to do his best to keep a low profile. He'll manage somehow, but at that moment someone else wasn't being rewarded very well despite their performance on the test. That someone was Hong Yeo, the professor of the fire element and mother of Hong Bian. She said that Bian got 3 questions wrong. Even Princess Izida from that failed duchy of MF managed to get at least 2 right, she said. She asked Bakrian, you couldn't answer questions that even those insects could. Does that mean you're worse than an insect? Bian just agreed silently with her mother. Yel told her to listen carefully and not become someone like her, a woman who was chased out of her own kingdom and now stuck in this stupid position as a teacher. She can't become the shame of our kingdom, she said. She told Bian that Bia, likely Bian's sister, had become a far greater person than her. Do you understand what I mean? She asked. Bian nodded, but in truth she didn't understand. She only lives the way she was taught, solving problems the way she was taught, problems made up of spells, formulas, and magic she was never taught. She wondered why her mother was tormenting her so much. Later in the Class S room, Baek thought to himself, I'm screwed. Of course he got placed in the one place he absolutely shouldn't be, full of weirdos and antisocial people. People were still whispering about him, not understanding how someone like Baek ended up in rank 6. And apparently among the antisocials, he was the most isolated. Baek thought that Dom, probably a student, would be really pissed. I mean, imagine studying your whole life just for someone like him to get ahead. Each student's rank changes based on their performance, so after each test they can move down. Even rank S isn't permanent. Now that he thought about it, soon someone would probably be promoted from rank A to rank S. Still, it was incredible to be here. To think that the characters of a game were standing right in front of him. In a few years, the average student in this class would become famous across the world, and around 5 of them would eventually betray the magical world. Maya Song is one of them. If Flame could stop that from happening, it would be ideal. Just then Professor Hall arrived and told everyone to take their seats. Most of them recognized him. He was the teacher of Class S, Lee Han-wol, and he was quite famous, known for the number of dark demonic humans he hunted and also as a 7th class battle mage. Han-wol said there were many talented students present, including one very unique student. He explained that as they all knew, the academy trains battle mages and they would undergo a rigorous 3-year education in high school. He didn't expect everyone to endure it, but he asked them to give their best during that time. Then he asked if anyone had questions. Everyone remained silent, so he began the class. Hongbian arrived late with a slap mark on her face, one her mother had given her. But Baek noticed her and thought, she's late. Did something happen to her? So he decided to check with his boo-boo glasses. Hongbian, Adolabi, villainess, fire mage, occasionally burns herself, guaranteed death, has a very cruel mother. Baek thought, this can't be right, guaranteed death. If Flame hears about her, Gibbon will die because of both of them. You could say this is the inevitable fate of a villainess. Baek wished he could save her, if only he were in a position to do so. He felt bad, but all he could do was watch from afar. Until suddenly, Hongbian sat down right next to him. Of course, this made Baek extremely nervous. He wondered, why is the story already going off track so much at the very beginning? Han-wol then announced that before they began class, there would be a staff succession ceremony, where they'd find out which magical staff they'd use during their time at the academy. Class N and Class A would attend the ceremony together. Baek thought that was a bit annoying, but he was also curious. There are 2 major events at Stella Academy. 1, the contract ceremony with a magical familiar, and 2, the staff succession ceremony. This was part of Stella Academy's special prestige. The staff succession ceremony was just as important. Later, they were in a space that seemed to be completely formed by magic. Lee Han-wol explained that there were staves ranging from low to high tier, and they needed to be prepared. All they had to do was choose the staff that interested them most. But the staff switching process was very complicated, so they had to choose carefully. Baek thought, even though the professor said they choose the staff, that's not how it works. In the world of Aether, the staff chooses the wielder. A staff only responds to someone worthy of commanding it, creating a resonance effect. That means, the staff chooses the person, and Baek wondered which one would choose him. If it were before, he would have gone for a staff that matched his level, Class F. But now that he was in Class S, he could afford to aim for something better. Probably the type that suited him was a short-form staff. Staves are divided into 2 categories, short wands and long staves or scepters. Wands are usually used by knights who need speed and agility, while longer staves are mostly used by priests or mages who concentrate a lot of power in a single attack. Once again, people were murmuring about Baek, wondering which staff he would pick. He thought, they can think whatever they want, but then someone approached him. Baek asked himself, who is this guy? The guy introduced himself, but Baek had no idea who he was. He had never heard the name before. The guy Slek asked which staff Baek planned to take. Baek replied, Anyone that resonates with me. Sux sneered and said that Baek should go after a staff that matches his commoner status. But Baek completely ignored him and responded that Slek shouldn't cause trouble for the professor either. Slek called him a bastard and asked if he wanted to fight. Baek thought, this guy is so annoying, and activated his Babu glasses. Slek Leyang, son of Marquis Sagebian, third-class subordinate of Prince Jeremy. Baek thought that given the lack of useful information, this guy was just another completely useless NPC. Sax said he would take that one, and told Baek to get out of the way. Baek realized that that one was the famous Edmure or Edmure, the strongest of the mid-high tier staves. A staff of that level is generally only used by professional battle mages. On the other hand, no matter how talented a student is, low mid-tier staves are usually their limit. Even professional mages barely manage to wield low mid-tier staves, let alone a mid-high one. There was another mid-high tier staff present besides Edmure, but it wasn't meant for selection, only for demonstration. Professor Rao said that once you find a staff, you should stand in front of it. Everyone moved toward the staff they wanted. Naturally, everyone was very impressed by the ones chosen by the main characters, because of course they're the main characters. Slek, furious, wanted to prove his worth. He headed toward Edmure, thinking he'd show everyone what a real genius looked like. But when he grabbed Edmure, he was rejected and thrown backward by the magical force. Baek thought, as expected, he failed as Slek hit the ground from the backlash. People started shouting to call someone, maybe the infirmary. Baek thought, everyone should just give up on the mid-high staves already. That's because Myung was heading toward it. The owner of that staff had already been decided. Myung Song really approached it like it was already his. People were stunned, whispering that even he wouldn't be able to lift Edmure. But when he touched it, the magic glowed, resonating with him. Yes, he managed to lift Edmure. Everyone said it was insane. A new student managed to wield a mid-high tier staff. But Baek had expected this. Now many people would realize just how talented Myung is. Then Myung suddenly looked at Baek and gave him a small smile. Baek thought, what was that, but decided it didn't matter. Soon, Flame would also go for a mid-high tier staff called Teravan, but this was where the story would branch into rotes. If Flame managed to pick Teravan, Myung Song would become interested in her genius, initiating the Myung Song route, but if she chose another staff, it would trigger a completely different route. Baek needed to make sure Flame brought Myung to the side of good. Finally, he saw Flame approaching Teravan, that small wand. Baek wondered if she was really going to pick it. He thought she was walking toward it, she had to, but in reality she walked straight past it and ignored Teravan completely. She was looking for another staff. Baek wondered, does she not know? She should. After all, she's inside an isekai too. She should have enough information from the book. Baek thought, this is bad. Flame can resonate with any staff, because she's the female protagonist. But if she chooses a weird staff, it'll ruin many potential rates. At this point he had to do something. He had to bring Teravan to her. So he used Blink to teleport right behind her, startling her. Baek told her he was wondering which staff she'd choose, and that he just wanted to help her because she looked a bit lost. But Flame told him to mind his own business and turned her back to him. Baek thought, something is off. Flame was supposed to be friendly with everyone, even if she was a bit antisocial, but for some reason she was being very cold. Still, he wasn't going to give up. His life depended on this. He said he just wanted to help her choose a staff, that's all. He thought there was a perfect staff for her right there. Flame asked, what the hell do you even know about staffs? Baek wondered, did I do something wrong, or maybe she just doesn't care about background characters. He asked her what she thought about that staff over there. Teravan. He said it might be really interesting for her. But just as he reached out his hand, he heard there was a very strange noise. Something shot in his direction, and when he looked at what he was holding, it was Teravan. He had resonated with Teravan and he asked himself why the hell this thing was in his hand. Flame was supposed to be the one to take it. When he looked to the side, Flame didn't look happy at all. She asked him what was going on and Baek replied, Nothing. Later, as Flame was walking among the students after the ceremony, she overheard whispers and people talking. They were saying that this year, 2 new students managed to attract and resonate with mid-high tier staves, which was impressive because historically, only 5 people had ever done that. But someone else mentioned that, surprisingly, one of those students had only used Blink, a basic teleportation spell during the magical manifestation exam. Flame started thinking about that. Later in the self-study hall, she finally had some peace and quiet. She thought, they won't stop talking about this no matter where I go today. The news that 2 new students got mid-high rank staves had spread instantly. But she still couldn't understand it. She asked herself, who was that boy who held Tiravan? She had read the original novel 3 times before ending up in this world, and a character named Baek in the Sun had never even appeared. The novel said that no one had ever managed to wield Tiravan, and yet this kid resonated with it so easily. Maybe he was just showing off to her. But Flame thought it was pointless, at least for now. Then a group of girls approached and asked if she was studying alone. She turned with a big smile, clearly forced, and said she wasn't such a nerd. She even called them brats, which confused one of the girls because they were all the same age. Flame tried to explain, saying it was just a habit, but the truth was that she called them brats because she was an adult inside Flame's body. When they asked again if she was going to study alone, she noticed that one of the girls was Jack, and Flame was surprised. Jack's style was very similar to hers. Flame said, "Not really. I've got a special supplementary meeting," and used that as an excuse to get out of there. She thought it was pretty hard being a student at this age. Then she literally ran into Raylong Rang, bumping right into him. He asked if she was okay after the hit, but noticed her expression didn't look good and asked if something had happened. Flame said, nothing in particular, but thought that maybe this boy was worried about her. She told him she was just heading to the Class S training hall. Ray said, "You can't slack off when it comes to training." Flame replied that he was unnecessarily honest. Apparently Onang was genuinely worried about her. He even put his hand on her shoulder and said he'd see her later. But Flame thought, even so, this boy is a little stiff. Turning the corner, she noticed that Jack was watching her with an extremely creepy expression. When she noticed that Flame had seen her, she ran away. But Flame decided not to think about that right now. Later at the supplementary meeting, she remembered that according to the original novel, Isao and Hongbian would be participating. It would be important to witness the female protagonist and the villain from a romantic fantasy confront each other. As she approached, she saw that all the main characters were already there, and Mian Song was seemingly flirting with Baek or something like that. Flame realized that the host of the meeting was Kyle from Class A, who looked a little surprised by everyone's presence. The purpose of the meeting was to help students improve their grades, and seeing famous students from Class S there, Kyle's reaction was totally expected. Even Myung Song was present, which surprised Flame a bit. He was considered the male protagonist of this world, and he seemed a little too interested in Baek in the Sun. Flame thought it must be a coincidence. But then she considered that Baek in the Sun only solved the 3 hell questions in the entrance exam, nothing else. She wondered if maybe he had known the answers in advance, just to get into Class S. If that were true, if he had been faking it all along, then he was an extremely dangerous person. Meanwhile, Baek just wanted someone to get Myung Song away from him. Myung asked why Baek was even there, saying he didn't need to attend this meeting. Baek replied that there wasn't a special reason. He said they just told him to come because his grades were bad. But he was really wondering why Myung was so interested in him anyway. Maybe it was because of Terevan and that had piqued his interest. Then the host told them to cut the small talk. Today, they were going to review the exam problems. In that ranking test, there had been 3 high difficulty problems that people called the 3 questions of hell. The host had worked hard to solve each one of them, but he was very nervous, especially with so many famous students in the room. Still, he thought, this is my chance. That's because he had heard that Baek in the Sun had the lowest score among them. So now, he was going to try to prove that he was better than him. Baek was going to show how to solve the problem first. Kai said the first question was indeed a trap designed to lead people into error. But while he was explaining, Myung wasn't paying attention, just staring at Baek. Baek thought, what is this guy? Then Myung asked, what do you think, Baek? Do you think it's correct? Baek wondered why he was acting so weird. He decided to be honest and said, I'm not really sure if it's correct or not. Everyone started wondering if Baek in the sun was saying Kai was wrong. That really pissed Kai off. Baek realized he had spoken too loudly. Curry even snapped the chalk and asked, so am I doing it wrong? Why don't you just come down here and solve it yourself? Poor Baek had just wanted to stay quiet but somehow ended up triggering this whole mess. And Myung-song was egging him on. Baek thought, that bastard. He did this on purpose. But he decided to just end it quickly. Now literally everyone was staring at him. He thought, these are the 3 hell questions, and put on his boo-boo glasses. The first trap question was, a mage casts a spell saying, Dear Earth, shed tears. What exactly does that mean? The answer was simple. If the earth cries, it means decomposition, a decaying state. It sounded ridiculous, but it actually made sense. Baek thought Kai, who was standing there provoking him, had solved it like a math problem, talking about things like cracked soil when it weeps or something similar. His method was wrong, but he got the question right by sheer luck. If there had been a similar question, Kai probably would have failed. Baek explained that the problem mentions earth, but what if it had been water or wind? Kai's method wouldn't have worked. Using a different method would have meant solving a completely different problem. Baek said that Kai only got it right by luck, not because the test was designed for someone like him to succeed. And Kai admitted that Baek was right. Baek thought, wow, I shattered his confidence way too easily. Later the discussion got a little friendlier, and Flame was shocked, wondering how something like this was even possible. Other students were writing down everything Baek said, even Yu-Seol and Hongbian. They were supposed to be fighting each other, but were now totally distracted by the problem Baek had posed. Flame thought, something about this doesn't feel right. After the class, Myung-song waved goodbye to Baek in a very flamboyant way, and Baek thought, if I start getting involved with Myung, this is going to turn into a huge mess. He figured it was probably because of Tiravan. He couldn't even use it now, but just by resonating with it, he had caught Myung's attention. In the original story, Myung had no interest in anyone other than Flame. Later on the way out, Baek ran into Hongbian. He thought she might be waiting for someone, but it was none of his business. He decided to keep walking, but it turned out that the person she was waiting for was actually him. She had something she wanted to ask, which obviously shocked him a little. Hongbian asked why he hadn't explained the solution earlier. Baek thought, I couldn't explain it. It's impossible to logically explain a test that doesn't make any sense. He assumed she had misunderstood something. Hongbian interpreted it as him not wanting to reveal his method, so she said she'd compensate him for it. She said she'd give him something fair in exchange because he should explain what was going through his mind. And Baek was like, wait, what? Later in a study room or maybe the library, Baek was reviewing the test. He muttered that he didn't understand why he was getting paid to explain 3 questions from a Class A test. Hongbian said she had her reasons and told him to just explain it. Baek replied, you only got those 3 questions wrong, right? Aren't you ashamed to ask for help from someone who got all the rest wrong? Hongbian said, nope, not at all. The only thing shameful would be not figuring out the answers to those 3 questions. If I can get the solution, I'm willing to do anything. Baek asked, why ask me specifically? There must be other students who got those questions right. And you're a princess. You must have plenty of friends. Hongbian replied that out of all 1,041 freshmen, including herself, only 3 people had answered the 3 hell questions correctly, one of them being Baek. She knew the questions were meant to have no answer, but Myung-song, Flame, and Baek had managed to solve them. Now she was in a difficult position because she couldn't. Baek asked if the questions were traps, weren't they not supposed to have an answer? And Hongbian asked, wait, you didn't realize that at the time? Baek thought, this is insane. Now he understood why he was placed in Class S, and also why Flame had been so rude to him. He didn't know all the world-building details and wasn't aware of the nature of those questions, but Flame was different. She had read the entire novel. Even if she hadn't played the game, she had a clear vision of the world and of the answers to those questions. But since a background character like him, someone who didn't even exist in the original story, had messed up her plans, she had no choice but to acknowledge him. The existence of Baek in the sun, he thought this was all a mess. Hongbi asked if he was okay, and Baek told her not to worry, it was just a thought. Then Baek asked if she would really reward him if he helped her with the question. Alright, he had a simple request. He wanted his staff to be turned into a magic sword. The blacksmiths in her kingdom should be able to do that easily. But Hongbi replied that only low-ranking mercenaries use swords, and asked why a mage like him would want one. Baek said it fit his style, and he thought to himself that he didn't want to explain to her that he had no mana. Instead, he asked if she would do it or not. Hongbi said of course she could handle it easily. Then Baek said, let's get started on the first question. The method for her would involve a shift in perspective. Baek knew very well that Hongbi's weakness was that the magic she used was strictly academic and structured. Because of that, she was someone who was a bit stuck on a single path. She would only realize this in her second year after suffering a significant defeat against Flame. Baek didn't think he could just give her hints now, but he could at least push her in the right direction. He asked if she knew what a nonsense quiz was. Hongbi said she had heard of it, but wasn't really sure what it meant. Baek said he would give her an example. He asked, what's between one knee and another knee? Hongbi asked, phase. Nope, Baek said. The answer is eye because between knee and knee there's an eye. Hongbi stared at him hard, and Baek told her not to get so stressed, just take it easy. There are formulas and techniques she doesn't know yet, and when that happens she needs to solve problems using creativity. You can't memorize creativity. Knowing lots of spells and techniques is definitely important, but for a mage the most important thing is to see the world beyond the limits of thought. Magic can grow even from the smallest shift, but Hongbi only thinks about things as they appear. Spells aren't about just memorizing and casting. She might be better at analytical thinking and judgment, yes, but she still lacks the most important trait for a mage, creativity. Hongbi got really serious about this, even a little nervous. Baek thought she was taking it a bit too seriously. He asked if she understood everything he said, and Hongbi replied that of course she did. Baek thought it was fascinating because even he didn't know what he was saying. He said he was glad she understood. Alright, let's begin. And then he just started telling her a bunch of dad jokes that made no sense. Like, the rock said hello to the log. What time is it? 8 log. 8 o'clock. What did the duck say to the female duck? Come quack. What's the best tea for hair loss? Chape. At. Hongbi was getting more and more agitated. Baek realized she was going to explode at any moment. Then he asked, what did the clouds say to the ocean when it was raining? And Baek thought, please, she has to know this one. She has to get this one. Hongbi asked, is it getting emotional? Baek said, that's right, you got it. She was super happy with an adorably sweet smile. Baek thought it was the first time he had ever seen her smile, whether in the game or in real life. He said, as expected from a princess, her creativity is on another level. Hongbi replied with a and told him to just move on to the next question. That night, in the city of Arcanium, poor Baek was exhausted. He thought, I just spent 3 hours asking nonsense questions to Hongbi. He didn't think she would actually take what he said seriously. Hongbi was undoubtedly an excellent mage with an extremely sharp mind, but her weakness was how rigid her thinking was. And Baek had kind of helped her work around that flaw. He felt a bit guilty, after all she was a villain, but he needed to transform Tuvon into a magic sword soon, so he could do much more. And it's not like he could change what he had already done. He told himself to stop overthinking and go buy the books he needed for class. He was looking for a very specific store and finally found it. It was a rundown shop, almost falling apart. But Baek already knew this detail. The owner had the creepy habit of pretending to be asleep while secretly watching customers. In this unnamed half-collapsed Decopta bookstore, the study notes of Manhwa, the student who graduated at the top of Stella Academy 10 years ago, were hidden. While a screen might show you what to do to attend a class, In real life, you needed a book. Not only that, depending on the book used, the rate of skill mastery increases. At first he bought books from well-known bookstores, but later discovered that some excellent books were hidden in stores without signs. If he watched a class on magical engineering while holding Mela's notes, he was guaranteed to get top scores. Even just wearing the Bobo glasses would give him decent grades, but this way he could discover the secret recipe. And then he finally found it. Just as he was about to grab the book, someone else reached for one too. That person was Aether. She asked if he knew who she was. Baek said yes. Wasn't she famous? Aether replied, "Ah, now I remember you."